I should have walked away the night he asked me to hold the envelope. It was January, 1978, and I didn't know what was inside. I told myself I didn't need to know. That's the lie people tell themselves when they're already too deep to climb out. If I had put that envelope down and left his apartment, I'd be someone different now. Someone who could sleep without pills. Someone who didn't spend 30 years looking over her shoulder. But I held it. I said yes. And that single moment, that one stupid, small decision in a kitchen that smelled like espresso and cigarettes, it changed everything. It put me inside a world where silence was survival and knowing too much was a death sentence. This is what happened. This is what I saw. This is what I've never told anyone until now. My name doesn't matter. You wouldn't know it anyway. I was 24 when I met Vincent Andretti, and I was nobody. A secretary at an import-export firm in Lower Manhattan, the kind of business that looked legitimate on paper and probably was, mostly. I answered phones, typed letters, filed documents. My boss was a nervous man named Carmine who wore expensive suits that didn't fit him right. He was always sweating, always checking his watch, always making calls in Italian that I wasn't supposed to understand. I didn't ask questions. That was the first lesson, if you wanted to keep your job. You kept your mouth shut and your eyes down. Vincent came into the office on a Tuesday in October, 1977. I remember because it was unseasonably warm and the windows were open, letting in the sound of traffic and construction from the street below. He didn't have an appointment. He didn't need one. When he walked through that door, Carmine's face went white. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. "Mr. Andretti," he said, and his voice had this pitch to it, this desperate brightness that made my stomach tighten. "I didn't know you were coming. Please, please, come in." Vincent didn't smile. He looked at Carmine the way you'd look at a dog that might bite, assessing. Measuring. Then he looked at me. Not the way men usually looked at me, not with interest or anything like desire. He looked at me the way you'd look at a piece of furniture, deciding if it belonged where it was. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they didn't blink much. He was maybe 40, hard to tell, with salt and pepper hair combed straight back and a face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so still. Everything about him was controlled. His posture. His clothes, a navy suit that fit like it was painted on. Even the way he breathed seemed deliberate. "Who's this?" he asked Carmine, but he was still looking at me. "That's Angela, she's my secretary, very good, very professional." She doesn't what?" Carmine swallowed. "She doesn't talk." Vincent's eyes stayed on me for another 3 seconds. Then he walked into Carmine's office and closed the door. I sat there, my hands shaking so hard I had to press them flat on the desk. I didn't know who Vincent Andretti was, not exactly, but I knew what he was. You could feel it, the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. The kind that made other men sweat. They were in there for 20 minutes. When Vincent came out, Carmine didn't. Vincent stopped at my desk. Up close, I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. He put a business card on my typewriter. It had a name, Vincent Andretti. And a phone number. "Nothing else. You need anything, you call that number," he said. His voice was quiet, almost soft. It made it worse somehow, the gentleness of it. "I don't understand," I said. "You will." He left. I stared at that card for 5 minutes before I had the nerve to knock on Carmine's door. When I opened it, he was sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. He looked up at me and his eyes were red. "Whatever he tells you to do," Carmine said, "you do it. You understand me? You do exactly what he says. What does he want? It doesn't matter. You just do it." That was the beginning. For 2 months, nothing happened. I went to work, I typed letters, I answered phones. The card stayed in my purse. I thought about throwing it away 100 times. I thought about quitting. But I didn't. I needed the job. I needed the money. And there was something else, something I didn't want to admit even to myself. I was curious. I wanted to know what Vincent Andretti wanted with me. I wanted to know what kind of world he lived in. The call came on a Friday night in December. I was in my apartment in Astoria, a studio with thin walls and a radiator that clanked all night. The phone rang at 9:30. I almost didn't answer. "This is Vincent," the voice said. Not Vincent Andretti. Just Vincent. Like we were friends. Like we knew each other. "Oh," I said. "Hello. I need you to do something for me." My throat went dry. "What?" "Tomorrow, 11 a.m., there's a cafe on Mulberry Street. Ferrara's. You know it?" "No, you'll find it. Sit at a table, order coffee. A man will come in, he'll ask if you're waiting for someone. You say yes, you're waiting for your cousin. He'll give you an envelope. You take it, you don't open it, you bring it to this address." He gave me an address in Brooklyn. "You give it to whoever answers the door. Then you leave, that's all, that's all." "What's in the envelope?" Silence. Long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, "You're smart, Angela. Don't stop being smart." He hung up. I sat there holding the phone. My heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I should have called him back. I should have said no. I should have packed a bag and gotten on a bus to anywhere. But I didn't. Because part of me, the part I'm ashamed of, wanted to see what would happen. Wanted to feel like I was part of something bigger than typing letters in a cramped office. The next morning I took the subway to Little Italy. Ferrara's was easy to find, a corner cafe with green awnings and small round tables. It was crowded, families and couples, the smell of espresso and pastries. I sat at a table by the window. My hands were sweating. I ordered coffee I didn't drink. The man came in at 11:15. He was older, maybe 60, with a gray mustache and a wool overcoat. He looked at me and I knew it was him. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. "My cousin," I said. He sat down, put a manila envelope on the table between us. "Don't lose this," he said. Then he stood up and walked out. The whole thing took maybe 30 seconds. I picked up the envelope. It was thin, maybe a few sheets of paper inside. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt like nothing. I took a cab to Brooklyn. The address was a brownstone in Bensonhurst, respectable looking, flower boxes in the windows. I rang the bell. A woman answered, maybe 50, wearing an apron. She looked at me, looked at the envelope, took it without a word. The door closed. I stood there on the stoop feeling like I'd just crossed a line I couldn't see but could feel, a boundary that once you stepped over it, there was no stepping back. Vincent called that night. "You did good," he said. "You'll do it again." It wasn't a question. For the next 6 months, I was his courier. Once a week, sometimes twice, I'd get a call. An address, a time, a description. I'd meet someone, take an envelope, deliver it somewhere else. Sometimes it was papers, sometimes it felt like there was money inside, thick and heavy. I never opened them. I never asked questions. And I got paid. Cash, in a separate envelope, left for me at the office. $200 every time. More money than I'd ever had. I told myself I was just delivering papers. That I wasn't doing anything wrong. That I didn't know what was inside those envelopes so I couldn't be responsible for it. But I knew. Of course I knew. You don't pay someone $200 to deliver papers you could mail for 32 cents. I knew, and I did it anyway. Vincent started calling me for other things. Small things at first. I need you to go to this restaurant, sit at the bar, order a drink. A man will sit next to you. You tell him the Yankees are looking good this year. Then you leave. Or, I need you to call this number, ask for Marco, tell him the package arrived on time. I was a messenger. A voice. A face that no one would remember. And I was good at it. I was forgettable. Pretty enough to not stand out, plain enough to blend in. The perfect kind of invisible. I met him in person again in March, 1978. He called and told me to come to an address in Murray Hill. It was an apartment building, pre-war, elegant. The kind of place with a doorman who didn't ask questions if you looked like you belonged. Vincent's apartment was on the 8th floor. He answered the door himself. He was wearing slacks and a white shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled up. It was the most casual I'd ever seen him, and somehow it made him more frightening. Like seeing a wild animal out of its cage. Come in. He said. The apartment was beautiful. High ceilings, hardwood floors, furniture that looked like it cost more than my entire life. There were books on the shelves, real books, leather-bound. Classical music playing low, something with violins. It didn't look like the home of a criminal. It looked like the home of someone cultured, refined. That's what I remember thinking, how normal it looked. How wrong I was. Sit, he said, gesturing to a leather sofa. I sat. He poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter, handed me one. I don't like scotch, but I took it. He sat across from me in an armchair, one leg crossed over the other, completely at ease. You've been reliable. He said. That's rare, thank you. You don't ask questions. You don't talk. I'm going to ask you to do something different. You show up when you're supposed to show up. Something that requires trust. You understand the value of discretion. My stomach dropped. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I need someone I can count on. Someone who can be around my business, my people, without causing problems. Someone who knows when to speak and when to be silent. I think you're that person. But I need to be sure. I am, I said, too quickly. He smiled, just barely, like I'd said something amusing. We'll see. For now, I want you to come work for me directly. You'll leave your job with Carmine. I'll pay you $500 a week. You'll do what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it. You'll be available when I need you. And you'll never, ever repeat anything you see or hear. Not to your friends, not to your family, not to a priest, not to anyone. Can you do that? $500 a week. I was making $150 at the office. It was 1978. $500 a week was a fortune. It was also a chain. I knew that. I knew once I said yes, there would be no quitting, no walking away. I knew I was agreeing to something I didn't fully understand. Something that could destroy me. But I also knew I was going to say yes. I'd already said yes, really, the first time I took that envelope. This was just making it official. I can do that, I said. Good. He raised his glass. To discretion, I raised mine. We drank. The scotch burned going down, and I wondered if this was what making a deal with the devil felt like. Civilized. Almost pleasant. The kind of thing you don't realize is a trap until the door locks behind you. Vincent Andretti wasn't what people think when they think mafia. He didn't yell, didn't wave his hands, didn't make threats. He was quiet. Methodical. He treated his business like a corporation, because that's what it was. An organization with rules, hierarchy, systems. He imported goods, legitimate goods mostly, olive oil and wine and textiles. But inside those shipments, sometimes there were other things. Things that made the real money. I learned not to ask about those things. I learned that the less I knew specifically, the safer I was, but I saw enough. I saw the men who came to meet with him. Always at night, always in places that could be explained away if anyone asked. Restaurants where he had a regular table in the back. Social clubs with no signs on the door. His apartment, late, after midnight, when the city was quiet and the streets were empty. These men treated him with deference, but not fear. Not the kind of fear Carmine had. It was respect. Respect earned through competence, through results, through the understanding that Vincent Andretti was someone who kept his word, who honored the old rules, who didn't make unnecessary noise. He had a temper, though. I saw it once. A man named Paulie, younger, maybe 30, came to Vincent's apartment to explain why a shipment was late. He made excuses. He blamed other people. He talked too much, his voice getting louder, more defensive. Vincent sat there, silent, letting him talk himself into a corner. When Paulie finally stopped, Vincent stood up, walked over to where Paulie was sitting, and without raising his voice, without changing his expression, he said, "If you ever lie to me again, I'll have your tongue cut out." "Do you understand?" Paulie went gray. He nodded. "Say it," Vincent said. "I understand." "Good. Now get out." Paulie left. I was in the kitchen, I'd been making coffee, and I'd heard everything. Vincent came in, saw me standing there. For a second I thought he was going to be angry that I'd overheard. But he just looked at me and said, "Fear is a tool. But you have to use it carefully. Too much, and people become unpredictable. Too little, and they become careless. The key is balance." It was the closest thing to a lesson he ever gave me. And it was true. I saw how he managed people, how he knew exactly how much pressure to apply, how much freedom to give. He had men who would die for him, not because he terrorized them, but because he made them feel valued, protected, part of something larger than themselves. He paid well. He was fair, in his way. If you did your job, if you were loyal, he took care of you. But if you crossed him, if you broke the rules, there were consequences. Always, my job was simple, on the surface. I answered his phone, took messages, scheduled meetings. I was his secretary, essentially, but for a business that didn't officially exist. I was at his apartment most evenings, from 6 until whenever he didn't need me anymore, sometimes midnight, sometimes later. I learned his rhythms, his habits. Coffee in the morning, black, no sugar. Phone calls before noon were business. Phone calls after 10 were problems. He read the Times every day, cover to cover. He listened to opera while he worked, Verdi mostly. He was meticulous about his appearance, his clothes, his apartment. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. I learned to read him. 2. The small signs that meant he was angry, even though his face never showed it. The way his jaw tightened. The way he'd go silent, a silence that felt dangerous. The way he'd look at someone and you just knew, that person was in trouble. And I learned to make myself invisible when I needed to be, to disappear into the furniture, to become part of the background so completely that men would say things in front of me they'd never say if they remembered I was there. That's how I learned what he really did. Not all of it, never all of it, but pieces. Enough to understand. He ran a crew, maybe 20 men directly under him, more if you counted associates and people who did occasional work. They controlled a piece of the waterfront, certain unions, certain businesses. Protection, mostly. You paid, and nothing bad happened to you. You didn't pay, and suddenly you had problems. Inspectors found violations. Shipments got delayed. Accidents happened. It was a system, old as the city itself, and Vincent was good at it. He didn't squeeze too hard. He didn't get greedy. He understood that sustainable profit meant keeping people alive and working, not bleeding them dry. But there were other things, too. Things I only heard whispers about. Money that needed to be moved, cleaned, made legitimate. People who needed to disappear, not always permanently, but sometimes. Disputes that needed to be settled. And above Vincent, there were others. Men whose names I never learned, who he answered to, who set the rules he followed. That's the thing people don't understand about organized crime. It's organized. There's a structure. And everyone, even someone as powerful as Vincent, has someone above them. I was careful. I never wrote anything down. I never repeated anything. I became exactly what he needed, a trustworthy presence, a competent assistant, a woman who could move through his world without causing problems. And in return, I was paid well. Very well. By the end of that first year, I had more money saved than I'd ever imagined having. I moved to a better apartment, a one-bedroom in Manhattan. I bought nice clothes. I could have quit my job and lived for a year on what I'd saved. But I didn't quit. Because by then, I was in too deep. And because, God help me, I liked it. I liked feeling important. I liked being trusted with secrets. I liked the power of knowing things other people didn't know. It made me feel special, chosen. It made me feel like I mattered. That's the thing they don't tell you about getting close to power. It's seductive. Not the violence, not the crime, but the proximity to control, to influence, to the machinery that makes the world work in ways most people never see. You start to feel like you're on the inside of something, like you understand how things really operate. And everyone else is naive, playing by rules that don't actually apply. It's a drug. And I was addicted, but there was a cost. There's always a cost. I stopped seeing my old friends. How could I explain what I did for work? How could I sit with them and pretend I was still the same person? I stopped dating. What man could I bring into this life? What would I tell him? I became isolated, my entire world shrinking down to Vincent's apartment, his business, his people. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true, and I was afraid. All the time, a low-level fear that lived in my stomach like a stone. Fear that I'd make a mistake. Say the wrong thing, be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fear that I'd learn something I shouldn't know, something that would make me a liability. Fear that one day Vincent would look at me and decide I was more risk than I was worth. That fear never went away. It just became part of the background, like the opera music, like the smell of his cologne. Something I learned to live with. In the summer of 1979, things changed. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, that was when it started. When the careful balance Vincent had maintained began to shift. It started with a man named Tommy Russo. He was younger than Vincent, maybe 35, ambitious, loud. Everything Vincent wasn't. He was a captain in another crew, under a different boss, but there was overlap in their territories, gray areas where jurisdictions blurred. Vincent didn't like him. I could tell. He never said it, but when Tommy's name came up, Vincent's face would go still. That dangerous stillness that meant he was thinking about problems. Tommy wanted more. More territory, more action, more respect. And he wasn't patient. He started pushing into areas Vincent controlled, small things at first. Talking to Vincent's people, offering better deals, trying to peel away loyalty. It was a challenge, subtle but real. And challenges, in that world, couldn't be ignored. I was there the night Vincent met with his top men to discuss it. It was late August, heat wave, the kind of night where the city feels like it's melting. Vincent's apartment had air conditioning, a luxury then, and the windows were closed, the curtains drawn. There were 5 men sitting around Vincent's dining table: Sal, his underboss, a thick man with sad eyes who'd been with Vincent for 20 years. Tony, younger, smart, Vincent's favorite. Marco and Dominic, soldiers, reliable. And Johnny, who handled money, quiet, good with numbers. I brought them coffee, espresso in small cups. I refilled ashtrays. I stood in the kitchen, visible but not present, and I listened. He's got ambition. Sal said. That's dangerous. Ambition's fine, Vincent said. Stupidity isn't. He's making moves without thinking, so we clip him, Tony said. Simple. Direct, we clip him, we start a war. His boss won't like it. There'll be consequences, so we talk to his boss. Explain the situation. Vincent shook his head. His boss is old. He's not managing Tommy the way he should. If we go to him, we look weak. Like we can't handle our own problems, so what do we do? Marco asked. Vincent was quiet for a long time. He lit a cigarette, smoked half of it before he spoke. We give him enough rope to hang himself. We let him think he's winning. We pull back, let him expand, let him get comfortable. And then we take it all back, hard. We make an example. But we do it smart. We make it look like his own mistake, like he broke rules everyone understands. That way, when we move, we have justification. How long? Sal asked. 6 months. Maybe less. He'll overreach. They always do. It was brilliant, in a terrible way. Patient. Strategic. And it worked. Over the next few months, Tommy Russo got bolder. He took over a gambling operation that had been under Vincent's protection. He started collecting from businesses Vincent had relationships with. He acted like Vincent was weak, finished, yesterday's man. And Vincent let him. He pulled his people back, absorbed the losses, said nothing. To everyone watching, it looked like Vincent was losing his grip, like he was too old, too cautious, too afraid to fight back, but he wasn't. He was building a case. Documenting every rule Tommy broke, every line he crossed. And when the moment came, in February of 1980, Vincent moved. I don't know all the details. I was deliberately kept away from that part. But I know Tommy Russo disappeared. Not killed, though maybe he wished he was. He was disgraced, humiliated, his own boss sanctioned him, stripped him of his position. Everything he'd taken was returned to Vincent, with interest. And the message was clear. Vincent Andretti wasn't weak. He was patient. And that made him more dangerous than anyone who led with violence. But there was a cost to that patience, too. Because while Vincent was focused on Tommy, other things were happening. Things he didn't see coming. The FBI had been watching him for years, I found out later. Building a case. And in 1980, they were getting close. They had informants, wiretaps, financial records. They were putting together a picture, piece by piece, and Vincent didn't know. Or maybe he did and thought he could manage it. He'd managed everything else, after all. But the FBI is different. They have resources, time, patience that matches or exceeds even the most careful criminal. And they were building something that would eventually collapse everything. I started noticing changes in early 1981. More careful conversations, more meetings in places where talking was harder to record. Vincent became paranoid about phones. He'd had me call people from pay phones, never the same one twice. He'd change routines, unpredictable schedules. He trusted fewer people. And he was tired. I could see it. The weight of maintaining control, of staying ahead of threats from every direction, it was wearing him down. That's when he asked me to hold the envelope. January, 1981. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. We were in his apartment, just the two of us. Everyone else had left hours ago. He was sitting at his desk, and he called me over. "I need you to keep something for me," he said. He handed me a manila envelope, sealed, thick. "What is it?" I asked. "Insurance." "For what?" He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something in his eyes that looked like fear. Not terror, but a recognition of vulnerability. "If anything happens to me," he said, "you open this. You read what's inside. And you decide what to do with it." "What do you mean, if anything happens?" "You're smart, Angela. You know things are changing. You know we're being watched. If they come for me, if I get arrested or worse, you open this envelope. It's names, dates, transactions. Everything. It's enough to bury a lot of people. But it's also enough to protect you. If you need to make a deal, if you need to trade information for immunity, it's all there." I stared at the envelope. It was heavy, maybe 50 pages. My hands were shaking. "Why me?" "Because you're not in the life." "Not really. You work for me, but you're not made, you're not sworn. You're not on anyone's radar. If they come after me, they'll probably leave you alone. You're just a secretary. But if they don't, if they try to pressure you, this gives you leverage. This keeps you safe. What if I just disappear? Take this and leave." He smiled, sad. "You could. But you won't. Because you're loyal. And because you know that running means living scared for the rest of your life. And you're too smart for that." He was right. I took the envelope. I went home that night and I hid it, behind a panel in my bathroom wall, a space I discovered when I moved in. And I tried not to think about what it meant that Vincent Andretti, the most careful man I'd ever known, was planning for his own downfall. The arrests came in June. Not just Vincent. 15 men, coordinated raids, Dawn, FBI and NYPD, warrants for racketeering, extortion, illegal gambling. Vincent was arrested at his apartment. I wasn't there. He'd told me not to come that week, said he had business that required privacy. I found out from the news. I was in my apartment, watching the morning broadcast. And there it was, Vincent's face, handcuffed, being led into a federal building. His expression was calm. He looked like a man who'd expected this. Like a man who'd already moved past surprise into calculation, should have run. That's what a smart person would have done. Packed a bag, gotten on a plane, started over somewhere far away. But I didn't. I went to the apartment, used my key, let myself in. It had been searched, thoroughly but not destructively. They'd taken files, papers, his Rolodex. But they'd left most things intact. I stood in his living room, in the space where I'd spent 3 years of my life, and I felt the walls closing in. Not literally. Psychologically. The realization that it was over. That the world I'd been living in, the one that felt solid and permanent, was actually made of smoke. And it had just blown away. For weeks, I waited. For the FBI to come to my door, to ask me questions, to pressure me. But they didn't. Vincent was right. I was nobody. A secretary. Not worth their time. They had bigger targets. The trial started in September. I didn't go. I couldn't. But I followed it in the papers. Vincent didn't testify. He didn't make deals. He sat there, silent, dignified, and took the charges. He was convicted in November. 20 years, federal prison. He was 43. He'd be 63 when he got out, if he got out. If he lived that long, I never saw him again. Not in person. I thought about visiting him, once. Wrote a letter I never sent. But what would I say? Thank you for showing me a world I should never have seen. Sorry that I wasn't brave enough to help you. I'm relieved I got away. None of it felt right. So I said nothing. I kept the envelope. And I disappeared into a normal life, or as normal as I could manage. I got a job, legitimate, a law firm, ironically. I was good at it. Organized, discreet, reliable. The skills I'd learned working for Vincent translated well. I made friends, casual ones, people who didn't ask too many questions about my past. I dated a little, never seriously. I moved apartments 3 times in 5 years. Never quite feeling safe enough to stay in one place. And I tried to forget. I tried to become someone else. Someone who hadn't spent 3 years on the inside of a criminal organization. Someone whose silence hadn't helped maintain a system built on fear and exploitation. But you can't forget. Not really. It's there, always, in the background. The knowledge of what you saw, what you did, what you chose not to do. The understanding that you were complicit, not just a bystander but an active participant, even if you told yourself you were just answering phones. Every choice I made, every time I took that money, every time I delivered a message or scheduled a meeting or stayed silent when I heard something I shouldn't have heard. I was part of it. I was helping. And I knew it. Vincent died in prison in 1993. Heart attack. He was 55. I read about it in the paper, a small article buried on page 7. It didn't say much. Just the facts: Vincent Andretti, convicted racketeer, dead at 55, survived by no one. No family mentioned. No friends. Just a man who'd lived a particular kind of life and died alone in a cell, probably exactly the way he'd expected to. I cried when I read it. Not for him, exactly. But for the waste of it. For the intelligence and discipline and capability that went into building something ultimately hollow. For the men whose lives he controlled, who probably mourned him genuinely, not understanding or maybe not caring that the system he upheld was inherently exploitative. For myself, for the years I gave to something that amounted to nothing. For the girl I was before I met him, naive and curious, who thought she wanted to see behind the curtain, who didn't understand that some knowledge costs more than it's worth. After he died, I took out the envelope. I'd never opened it. Never even been tempted. But with him gone, it felt safe. I sat at my kitchen table and I broke the seal and I read every page. He was right. It was everything. Names I recognized, names I didn't. Dates, amounts, transactions. Payoffs to cops, politicians, union officials. Details of crimes I'd heard whispered about. Evidence that would have put dozens of men in prison. Evidence that would have destroyed lives, families, legacies. And at the bottom, a note in Vincent's handwriting: use this if you need it. Or destroy it. Your choice. I burned it. Every page. In my bathtub, one sheet at a time, watching the names and numbers curl and blacken and turn to ash. It took an hour. And when it was done, when the last page was gone and all that was left was gray powder, I felt lighter. Not absolved. Not forgiven. But free, finally, from the weight of carrying secrets that weren't mine to keep. That was 30 years ago. I'm older now. Different life, different city. I never married, never had children. I have a quiet existence, and most days I'm grateful for it. But sometimes, late at night, I think about those years. About Vincent. About the men I knew, the things I saw, the person I was. And I wonder about the choices we make, the small ones that seem insignificant at the time but that add up to a life, a direction, a destination we never consciously chose. If I could go back, if I could tell that 24-year-old girl anything, I don't know what I'd say. Don't take the card. Don't answer the phone. Run. Maybe. But would she listen? Would I have listened? I don't think so. I think I was always going to take that envelope. I think I was always going to say yes. Because I was curious. Because I was ambitious. Because I wanted to matter. And Vincent Andretti offered me a chance to be part of something larger than myself, even if that something was corrupt and violent and ultimately doomed. The thing about silence is that it becomes habit. You learn to hold things inside, to carry weight without showing it, to move through the world pretending you're normal while knowing you're not. You learn that most people don't really want the truth anyway. They want the version of you that's comfortable, that doesn't ask difficult questions or demand honest answers. So you give them that version. You smile and nod and deflect. And inside, you carry the real story, the one that doesn't fit into polite conversation, the one that would make people uncomfortable if you told it. This is that story. The one I've never told. The one that's lived in my chest for 30 years, heavy and secret and mine. I don't know why I'm telling it now. Maybe because enough time has passed that it feels safe. Maybe because everyone involved is dead or too old to care. Maybe because I'm tired of carrying it alone. Or maybe because I think someone should know what it was really like. Not the movies, not the myths, but the real thing. The boredom and routine mixed with terror. The ordinary people doing extraordinary evil because it paid well and because everyone around them was doing it too. The quiet compromises that add up to a life you don't recognize. I don't want sympathy. I don't deserve it. I made my choices. I lived with the consequences. I got out alive, which is more than a lot of people can say. But I want you to understand something. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. It's not the story you've been told. It's gray and mundane and sad. It's watching.